Employers sense in me a denial of their values. Ignatius J. Riley. Hello, I'm Kennedy Weibel,
And I'm Rebecca Weibel Capone.
and this is Reading Pop Classics, the podcast where we read and discuss popular books from the modern era. We're starting with classics, what we're calling classics, right? Modern classics.
We're picking these books.
So today we're talking about A Confederacy of Dunces. The book follows Ignatius J. Riley and an assortment of his family members, acquaintances, enemies, frenemies, fellow citizens of New Orleans over a period of what feels like 2 to 3 months, maybe. His mother crashes their car drunk in the beginning of the novel. She can't afford to pay the damages, so she threatens to sell their house, which Ignatius, who is 30, happily unemployed, and lives at home, wants to keep living in. The threat of losing the house pushes Ignatius to concede to going out and getting a job. And what plot there is in this novel comes from this setup and then the follow through. It was first published in 1980, written much earlier. We'll discuss that later. It runs between 390, 450 pages, depending on the edition you're reading. The most common edition I see usually is the Grove Press edition. It's the one with the yellow and gold block at the top with the title. So if you haven't read this book, you're likely familiar with it. You've probably seen it at least on a Barnes and Noble table, one of the front of store table selections. It's been up there for like 30 years now. If you walk into Barnes and Noble today, the day you're listening to this, you'll probably find it on a table near the front with a little sign on it that says staff favorites or American humor classics, something like that. Whatever the sign says, Catch 22 is probably also on the table. A Vonnegut book, a Flannery O'Connor collection, maybe Mark Twain. And that's where we are. Confederacy of Dunces, Pulitzer Prize winner, considered a comedy. Rebecca, have you read it before?
This is the first time I've read it, but this book was recommended to me several times over the years, starting probably in high school from people whose opinions I trusted, right? Like other people that read, other people that I felt like read well, read interesting, things. And I do want to say that I picked it up maybe in my 20s. I remember owning this book at some point, and I don't know if can't remember now if I started it and I just wasn't into it. Like maybe it just wasn't sometimes you pick up a book and it's just not the time to read it, right? In your life. Like you pick it up and you're not interested. And I did not get through it.
The copy that you thought you used to own is the copy in front of me here, and your page was still folded down. I can see the impression of it still about page 71 or 72.
I did. Oh, yes. Oh, right. Because I gave you the copy. So I got to page 71 or 72. And I'm going to go ahead and tell you, I do not remember why I put the book down. I did not remember anything pertinent from it. And when I started this book, when I repurchased it, by the way, for this podcast to read it, it felt like a very fresh book to me. But so this is the first time I have actually read the book. And I did enjoy it for what it's worth. I think it's kind of worth mentioning whether or not we liked something, because just because we've selected it for this podcast does not necessarily mean that maybe we have loved the book, right? And this has always been described to me as a comedy and a very funny book, which I did find it to be. And this was not the first time you've read this book, is that correct?
This is my second or third read. Like you, it came up a lot. Like people recommended it to me. I came across your copy at some point. I ended up with it. I don't know if you had gone to college and I was home pilfering bookshelves or what. I read it. I think I read it after college for the first time. I put it off. Something about too many people recommending it made me sort of nervous about actually reading it. And the first time I read it, I didn't like it. This is, I think, because so many people told me it was funny. And I don't know what I was expecting from that. Not only did people tell me it was funny, people told me it was hilarious. So funny. Oh my God, the funniest book I've ever read. And I'm not sure what I expected out of that, but the first time I read it, I disliked it, I think, because of that expectation. I read it again and liked it, and then I read it again for this episode. So this is third, I guess, my third read through for Confederacy. Before we kind of talk through the points of the novel, like some of the things we thought about it, does this pass the Bechdel test?
Yeah, so this is a little segment we'll be doing with each of our podcasts, each of our episodes, does this book pass the Bechdel test? Because a lot of these books are modern. We're going to be reading and discussing books by both, male and female authors. This book does not pass the Bechdel test. So if you're not familiar with the Bechdel test asks the question with for women, or what women are in the book, and do women in a certain book or a certain media have conversations that do not center around a man?
I was gonna say when she goes to get the pastries and she talks to when Ignatius's mother, Irene, goes to get pastries and she talks to the woman who sells the beignets or whatever it is they get. But she does ask, they talk about Ignatius, don't they?
And she talks about Ignatius in every single scene with every character, because there are many conversations between her and Santa Battaglia, so another female character in the book. And every conversation, Irene is mentioning Ignatius, and it irritates Santa.
What about, first of all, it's ridiculous. You have to dig this deep. I recognize, but what, the woman who owns the club and Darlene, the dancer,
Oh, okay. So Lana Lee is the woman who
Lana Lee
she's
and
the one who owns the
Darlene talk
club,
about,
the Night of Joy.
yeah, they talk about Darlene's dance. They talk about why Darlene, well, Lana talks a lot about why Darlene, by talk, Lana yells at Darlene a lot about how stupid she is, but she
They
does
do
accuse her
talk
of
about the
being,
dance. They do talk about the bird. Is the bird a boy? Does that count?
the bird does not count. No, the
The
bird,
bird does
the
not
bird
count, even if the
doesn't
bird is a
count.
boy.
I think I mean, I think it passes. I think Lana Lee and Darlene have conversations that are purely about Darlene's career.
Well, I
Darlene's
think you're
career as a
right.
dancer in a strip club, but still,
But sex work is legitimate work, right? And that is something that is widely being recognized in modern day time, that this has been a job for women for years, right? This is work. There is a consumer market for it. It is a legitimate way to make money, and we can respect that.
yeah,
And I do think that they do, you're right, discuss Lana Lee's job, Lana Lee's dance, where she wants to go, right? Like what she wants to be doing. Essentially, she's just at the bar to encourage people to buy drinks, right? And this is her moving up in the world.
yeah, no, she's yeah, Darlene's career minded. She wants to move up.
This is her moving up in her career. She wants to be, a go-go dancer or a stripper, whatever it is, and she wants that to start at the Night of Joy. So I think you're right. This book does pass the Bechdel test.
I I have to say the Darlene's inability to remember the single line she has at the beginning of her dance that she's supposed to do.
It's the
Like,
one line that she continues to mess up.
I thought that
I
was
did
very
really enjoy that. I do appreciate that she never gets it right, and she just absolutely can't. And then uses the excuse that, like, I want to be a dancer and not an actor, which I found to
yeah,
be really funny.
yeah. She's like, I'm supposed to be a dancer, not an actor. She's like, it's one line.
I came out here to do my dance. I did not come here to learn lines and to be an actress. And I did enjoy that. All right. So A Confederacy of Dunces, there it is. It does pass the Bechdel test. So we dug a little deep for it. However, it does pass the Bechdel test.
That brings us to the first of my like kind of points I wanted to bring up is, did it sounds like you do think this book is funny. You thought this was funny?
I did think this was a funny book. Now I'm with you that I did hear it described so often as like laugh out loud funny, to use a modern expression, we're rolling on the floor laughing. This book is good. This book is good humored. It has several funny elements in it. I've in this maybe this is me. It's not very often that I find myself really laughing out loud when I'm reading. I mean, a smile, a snort or something, but like a big rollicking laugh is not something that happens to me a ton when I'm reading, and I'm not sure what that's about. I couldn't tell you why that is.
No, same.
But I did think this was a funny book. There was a lot of smiling. I mean, there were things I was like highlighting, things I was just sort of like, flabbergasted about. Lana Lee, I particularly enjoyed. Joan's character as somebody. I mean, everything in it, I think, is sort of so satirical and presented in such a ridiculous manner that it does feel like this, like almost like a lighthearted book.
Yeah, it's a long book, but it's like you, I don't laugh out loud at books. I don't always laugh out loud at movies a lot either. I don't know why. It's rare. I'm not like a burst out laughing person.
Yeah, I guess that's true for me. I was trying to think about that with TV shows and movies. I mean, certainly I watch a lot of comedies and it's not that it never happens, but yeah, I'm not a huge laugh out loud person, I suppose, and maybe in general. But I did find this to be, but I did smile a lot in this book.
It has a lot of funny parts in it, and the people are funny. I think when I first it was recommended and I first read it and was underwhelmed. I think it was because I don't know if I was expecting like Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, which is jokes. Like there are jokes in that book. It is set up like, Douglas Adams, who wrote it, part of wrote with the Monty Python guys, Monty Python and the Holy Grail. He worked with them. He's British comedy legend, and I guess I was expecting maybe something like that. And this isn't funny like that. Like there's some funny lines in it, but the characters, I guess, are funny. The situations are funny more so than,
More so than it's flat out jokes. Yeah. And I think that's where I was going, that it does have this humorous feel to it throughout the book. The characters are ridiculous, the situations are ridiculous, but yeah, it's not straight up jokes. And I mean, there are things that are so ridiculous that they're funny, and that is not always something that you're really laughing about
yeah.
so much as like an inward smirk, if you will.
I think I also struggled the first time with the fact that Ignatius Riley is so horrible that it took me a little while to realize. I don't think it was until my second read through that I appreciated that he's not a main character we're supposed to enjoy. Like he's a wretched person.
He is a wretched person.
There is nothing redeemable about him at any point. He doesn't like show an occasional kindness toward like, I guess he likes cats, but I'm not letting him get away with that. Like he's awful through and through. He's awful to everyone. He never yields. He is unyieldingly terrible as a person.
So one of the points I wanted to bring up, which has fed into nicely, is and you've a little bit answered what your opinion is on this, is Ignatius J. Riley an anti-hero? That's what I think the question is. And for what it's worth, that thought came to me maybe like halfway through the book, right? So like before I had finished it, it was like, is he an anti-hero? And then as I'm reading it, like I'm with you on like, is he redeemed? He's really not.
No, he gets away with it.
He gets away with it.
Yeah.
He writes this he's working for Levy Pants. I loved his filing system was to just start throwing files away.
Okay, so I read this book, and after I read it, I had a temp job briefly, like filing, like just filing stuff. And it went on and on and on, just like paper into folders, and no one ever came to get the folders. No one ever looked at the folders. And I thought about this a lot, his system of filing, which was to just take all the filing and throw it in the trash.
100%. I also had a job in my younger days and of working in offices and having that type of work where I would be filing things that were just that nobody ever came for, nobody ever looked at, nobody ever went back to, and it did feel very much like, what are we saving this for? Owning a business, I also did some filing and saved papers. That there was a day that was just like, what am I doing? Why am I doing this? And you know what I did? I threw a bunch of stuff away and it legitimately never mattered. It never mattered. It never came back to bite me. It was never like, oh, what did I do with all of those papers? I remember my employees asked me where the papers had gone, and I told her I threw them away, and she was like, oh, but what happens if we need them? And it was just like, but we've never needed them in all of these years.
No,
I guess we'll find out, and it never mattered. So there was a moment of being like, is he gonna be redeemed at some point? Is it going to turn out that like eventually he does something great for Levy Pants? Which is not the case. However, we could argue he sets a chain of events in motion, though. So for the man who owns Levy Pants, right? So for like Mr. Levy, sort of because of Ignatius coming in and shaking things up, as it were. I mean, he does end up coming back to this point of like wanting to get past his negative feelings about Levy Pants, right? So Mr. Levy has, his father never let him participate in the business, or like never let him move the business forward, didn't take his ideas. So when his dad passed and the business is passed down to him, he's just like, screw this business. And he's just letting it letting it falter. He's letting it fail, and really not having anything to do with it. He's living off the money from it, and and not trying to further the business, which obviously really upsets his wife, who was a character I really enjoyed. We can come back to her. But then in the end, I really enjoyed her because I just found her, because much like Ignatius, I found her to be such a ridiculous character that I enjoyed her. So I can't say that I liked her, but like I enjoyed the scenes with her because she was so ridiculous. But to finish about Levy, um, Ignatius writes this horrible letter to one of their like main suppliers. They have like three people that are selling these crap pants, right? And like he writes this horrible letter. The guy's going to sue him. He's going to lose the business. He's going to lose all of his money. His wife hates him more than ever. Um, and he sort of sees, like, he understands that Ignatius is lying to him. He completely gets it. I can blame this on Miss Trixie. I can have Miss Trixie is obviously, you know, out of it, right? We can have her declared insane or demented or whatever it is, and have and kind of blame this on her. And it's a faultless blame, right? I mean, she's blamed and nothing bad's going to happen to her. It's going to make the lawsuit go away, and he decides to start making Bermuda shorts.
Miss Trixie desperately wants to be fired and not have to work there anymore. And every time someone tries to fire or retire her, Mr. Levy's wife is like, no, you're trying to get rid of that poor old woman and all, so that's all she has. Completely against any of Miss Trixie's actual wishes, who desperately wants to stop going to Levy Pants.
All she wants is for her, like, to get her Christmas ham or the turkey or whatever it was she was promised. They continue to not get her.
Yeah, she was promised a ham, right?
Right. So it's like she's asking for this one, like, very simple thing. This woman's like, just give me the ham that I was promised. And Mrs. Levy is like, no, I'm going to continue to have you working forever, because you're fulfilling your destiny and it's giving you something to do. While she, of course, while Mrs. Levy obviously does nothing except for, her hair and makeup and using her exercise board, which to me sounds like something she just lays on and it moves her around, and clearly does not actually exercise her.
I don't know what an exercise board is. Like the muffler, I had to look up muffler, like that Ignatius wears a muffler.
Yes, to me, a muffler is one of those little things that you stick your hands in.
That is a muff.
Oh, that is a muff.
You couldn't name an article of clothing that today, but a muffler is a scarf, I guess. I don't know if there's a difference in the kind of scarf it is, or if it's sort of like how some people call them beanies, some people call them toboggans. I think the Canadians call them toques, the winter hat. Because this book was written in the 60s, we should point out.
It was published in 1980, but it was written in the 60s, and so the book takes place in like the late 60s, essentially. But yeah, so I will point out that, that Mr. Levy does have this epiphany, right? He turns around, he wants to be more invested. Everything works out for him.
But what does he want? He wants to, doesn't he's like, I'm going to change this business. We're going to pivot. And he pivots to shorts.
He pivots to shorts. He wants to make Bermuda shorts that are more stylish, right? Like he wants to like update them. He wants them to reflect like whatever modern clothing, people are wearing in the 60s. He wants like better fabric. He wants them to be better. He wants to make the company better. He wants to make it into something that he feels more passionate about. So yes, like I don't know that we can call Ignatius J. Riley an anti-hero. Like he's not likable, and I didn't like him more at the end of.
No, I don't think he's an anti-hero. I don't think he's.
I think he's meant to be an unlikable character, but he does change things for the better for Mr. Levy in the end, or he is a catalyst, right, for this change.
Levy and his wife I don't dislike them and I don't dislike the parts with them, but they are the weakest part of the book for me. I think just because they're not in New Orleans, like they're out in their house in the country, I guess it kind of sounds like outside of New Orleans. And everyone else everything else takes place in this sort of like pressure cooker that Ignatius's outrageous behavior is exacerbating, like inside the walls of New Orleans itself.
Right. This is, to use the very cliched expression, New Orleans is a little bit of like a character in the book.
There's a lot made of the dialects that he writes in and how accurate they are. But no, I also thought it was funny. As we're talking about it, I'm realizing, did you ever watch The Kids in the Hall, the sketch show?
Yeah, but it's been a real long time.
One of the things I always appreciated about that show is when you tell somebody about one of the sketches that you think is funny, describing it is also funny. And I'm realizing as we talk about it, like describing this book is like also funny.
Yes.
Like this guy inherited a pants factory that he's let fall to ruin. He doesn't care much about it. And he's finally like, I'm going to pivot. I'm going to turn it all around. I'm going to change the direction of this place. Shorts. Like, I think that's funny that his big change is like just little pants, like pants that are just littler.
Less
Yeah.
pants.
It's interesting because there's also entire plot lines that take place almost without him.
The Night of Joy takes place, Lana Lee and
Yeah. Part of the opening, the second scene of the book takes place in the Night Joy, and him and his mother gets drunk there while Ignatius drinks Dr. Nuts until they throw them out, and then they wreck the car. But then the whole Night Joy thing kind of takes place parallel to whatever Ignatius has going on, which is that he is, and I guess we should mention the plot at this point, like 20 minutes into it, but he's going from, well, I guess not job to job. He goes to what, two jobs? I guess he only has two. Yeah, there's two jobs.
he goes to two jobs.
I want to describe it as though he goes on a series. It's only two though. He has a job at Levy Pants where he's supposed to be filing. His very first day, he just starts gathering the files and dumping them in the trash. This is where, so I think it's a weird part of the novel. I think it's a part that structurally, like, but I think it's weird that Myrna Minkoff, who is in a regular book, she would maybe be or in a different kind of book, she would maybe be the love interest. She's sort of she's his frenemy, his antagonistic paramour. I don't know how you would describe it. We don't ever actually see them. We only see them interact in like the last 15 pages of the book.
So they're very similar.
They write letters and other people talk about them.
Right. We only read their letters.
They went to college together. Ignatius went to college. He majored in, what did he major in? Philosophy? Boethius's Consolation of Philosophy. Oh, he was a medieval studies major. That's what it was. And he firmly believes that like progress is the ruination of mankind, that the like old gross medieval system was like the last time a man could truly be free and didn't have to work and toil, because Ignatius hates work. And he went to college with Myrna Minkoff.
And it's interesting because, something that I think is a little bit of a point or a theme in the novel is a little bit of this: is education enough when you don't have any experience, right? Is education enough? Because he's constantly talking about how he's educated. His mother is constantly talking about how he's educated. She's furious that he gets this job at Levy Pants where he's quote unquote just filing, right, with all your education. We'll get more into it, but his second job is as a hot dog vendor, right? Even more mortified about that, right? Like they're always on him because he doesn't have a job, and then with this job, she's like ashamed of it, right? So she's not even taking this thing of like, but at least he's working. She's mortified, and in the end, towards the end of the book, she says, Ignatius, you have all this schooling, you have all this education, but you didn't learn how to be human. So he clearly does not have, he doesn't have people skills. He doesn't really know how to work. He doesn't know how to have a job. And I think I think that's always a pertinent theme. I think that's always a discussion, no matter what sort of, period we're in, right? I mean, that's something that we talk about now of like, we're asking kids to pay all of this money, or to go into debt to like start your adult life with $100,000 at least $100,000, right? And we know people that have spent much more on that. You start behind. You start with this $100,000 debt, and then it's like, and then you come out of college, and the first job you get, and you and I are college educated, right? Our first jobs also both included filing, which I think at this point we have learned is often superfluous. But yeah, so I found that to be like the theme in the book, because his education is brought up so often, and Myrna's education, and I don't believe Myrna finishes school.
No, she drops out and goes to New York. We should also point out that, just real quick, we mentioned that like Ignatius is kind of a vile person. Just a quick cataloging. He, besides refusing to work and letting the Social Security or whatever it is that his mother gets from his father's death support both of them, he's verbally abusive to almost everyone he talks to. He masturbates to fantasies about his dog. He goes to movies and screams rape her to actresses he doesn't like on the screen. He not only throws away all the filing at Levy Pants, but he then tries to start an uprising,
an insurrection, if you will, among the factory workers, and have them come and like brain Gonzalez, basically, right? Like he's encouraging one of the factory members to hit this guy with a brick.
The very nice man who hired him and has been very patient with him encourages them to hit him with a brick. And not only does he encourage them to hit him with a brick, he gets them to do this uprising under the false belief that he is like from management and that this is to an extent encouraged and approved. And he also puts their jobs in jeopardy only so that he can write a letter to Myrna Minkoff saying that he did it to make her think that he is doing social justice and social actions within the world because he is jealous of her letters where she says she's doing things like that. Like he doesn't actually care about the conditions of the workers. He has them go through this for a petty little grievance he has with Myrna, this lady he was terrible with in college.
Absolutely. Well, so something that I enjoyed is there's this expression in Thailand, same, same, but different, right? And I love that. I apply same, same to different to so many things. And Myrna and Ignatius are same, same, but different, right? So, I mean, from one thing, she comes from money and he doesn't, right? Like it's implied she has this like rich father who's doing things. And they both have this like very self-righteous attitude. They both have this attitude that that they know better than everybody. They come kind of blustering into things. They make noise, they make trouble, but they're not doing anything. Like they're not successful. Again, they're using their education.
I'll give an example that backs
We're educated and that makes us better than people, but they're not, right? They're not doing anything. So please use your example.
Yeah, that backs up what you're saying. I pulled this. So this is in a letter that Ignatius is reading from Myrna about a theater group that she's joined in New York. I'm sorry, it's not a theater group. They're making a movie. That's what they claim. They're trying to make a movie.
Oh, that's right. She's making a movie. That's the first thing that she writes to him about is the
Yeah.
movie.
All right, so they're planning a film about interracial marriage. Although it will be a low budget number, the script itself is chock full of disturbing truths and has the most fascinating tonalities and ironies. It was written by Shmuel, a boy I've known since Taft High days. Shmuel will also play the husband in the movie. We have found a girl from the streets of Harlem to play the wife. She is such a real, vital person that I have made her my very closest friend. I discuss her racial problems with her constantly, drawing her out even when she doesn't feel like discussing them. And I can tell how fervently she appreciates these dialogues with me. So that's the end of the quote. That's Myrna. I kept going back to I discuss her racial problems with her constantly, drawing her out even when she doesn't feel like discussing them. And then the complete under the delusion that this person like must appreciate this, talking with this wealthy white lady about her racial problems in 1960s America. But it's this letter that I think is what kicks off Ignatius's insurrection with the factory workers who are also Black.
Yes. So something that I see in them again is, so we've talked about their similarities a little bit, and then the differences that I see a little bit. Myrna is consistently trying to do things. She's not going about it the right way. She's going about it very Ignatius style. She's going about it the wrong way. She like Ignatius thinks like I have this education, I'm very smart, and that makes up for all of these things that I lack. Right. Or it blinds her to the realities of what's going on around her. But she is trying to do good. She's doing it poorly, but she is trying to do good. Ignatius is not. It's just like flat out not.
Yeah, no, he's a bad person.
He's a bad person. And then I'm going to also read a quote that follows up on this, right? So as he is talking to the factory workers, who we will, make everyone aware that, of course, that in this book they're all Black, right? So Myrna's, sharing her experience with this actress that they have found to be in their movie. It inspires Ignatius to do this insurrection or whatever you want to call it with the factory workers. And he's writing about it, right? So he's not saying this to them, but he's writing about it and says, in a sense, I have always felt something of a kinship with the colored race because its position is the same as mine. We both exist outside the inner realm of American society. Of course, my exile is voluntary. However, it is apparent that many of the Negroes wish to become active members of the American middle class. I cannot imagine why. I must admit that this desire on their part leads me to question their value judgments. However, if they wish to join the bourgeois, it is really none of my business. They may seal their own doom. So what I have written next to this, mine is egregious white privilege, exclamation point. And this is one of those things that I think is, it's clearly it's obviously meant to be so shocking that it's funny, right? Like the person who's writing this book does not think this way. This is an absolutely he is meant to be so wrong at every turn, but it is kind of that. But of course, my exile is voluntary, right? You like just amazing to me that this has come, that this has come out of this character. And so I just wanted to, and so I had that underlined. I really wanted to discuss it on this podcast, and then you reading about Myrna really kind of dovetailed into this, right? Because he's over there, like, because they're asking to be paid more, and it's kind of like why are you aspiring to this middle class? Because again, something that we know is like, Ignatius again he doesn't come from money, right? I mean, he doesn't his section, the neighborhood is often described as a neighborhood that's poor. The house isn't worth a lot. It's run down, etc. But he has education.
He has education, but he doesn't come from money, but he doesn't think about money. He doesn't think about it because his mother gives it to him.
He's privileged enough that he has not had to work for 30 years.
Yeah,
He's privileged enough that somebody paid for him to go to college for years and years for a degree he does not use.
no.
He has this education to get himself, a higher paying job, as it were, that he's never used because he just feels so above it. And then it's like you have, the people in this factory, because we learned from Jones, right, at the Night of Joy, that he's picked up for vagrancy because he doesn't have a job.
We should talk a little about Burma Jones while we're here. Burma Jones is of our main characters, and there is a cast of main characters, right? Like we have Ignatius and his mother Irene. We have
Patrolman Mancuso, who we have not talked about
Patrolman
yet,
Mancuso, and
his
the
aunt.
novel begins with him trying to pick Ignatius up for vagrancy, failing at it, and that's when they end up in the Night Joy. And it is Officer Mancuso who finds them when Irene crashes the car drunk. And even though Ignatius is not drunk, he's so worked up by the crash that he's just vomiting out of the car all over the street. When Officer Mancuso comes up upon them, and then Officer Mancuso comes to the house to talk to Irene about the damages, offers to introduce Irene to his aunt, Santa Battaglia. Santa Battaglia then becomes a character and introduces Irene to Mr. Claude Robichaud. I'm
Mhm.
not saying that last name right at all, but I'm not looking it up. But to Claude Robichaud, there is also the patrons, or I'm sorry, the employees of the Night Joy, which are Lana Lee.
Well, she's the owner of the Night of Joy.
Darlene is she's one of the girls who goes around pushing drinks on guys, like, let me get you something, order me one too. Just getting guys to spend more money. And then Burma Jones is a young black guy who had been picked up for vagrancy.
By Mancuso, I believe. Or maybe that's not stated, actually. Maybe we don't know. I think he's just there.
I no, I think he's just in the jail because the sergeant is giving Mancuso grief about how he never manages to pick anyone up for vagrancy.
And the one guy he does pick up is Claude Robichaud.
Yes, who's an old man.
His first interaction with the Rileys, as it were, right, is that he sees and is taken by Irene, coming in and defending her son and yelling at Mancuso. But he steps in and says that the police are all communists, and so he is, Mancuso brings him down to the station, and
And that's where we meet Burma.
his boss is absolutely infuriated that he has brought in this nice old man for no reason, and sends him home. And Jones sees this, right? Like Jones is picked up for vagrancy, and watches the interaction of, Mancuso's boss just being like, you just brought in this nice old white man,
Yeah.
like send him home, and I'm punishing you for this like idiocy.
And he has to go work in the bathroom. Or no, he gets to go back to the street after that, but after a while he has to go work in the bathrooms at the bus station. So Burma Jones comes to the is it called the Night of Joy?
Night of Joy, yeah.
The Night
I was
of
gonna
Joy.
correct you on that one. Night of Joy.
Burma Jones comes to the Night of Joy and applies for a job as the porter, which is sort of like the guy who cleans up, fixes the chairs, keeps the floors neat, wipes down the bar, like a sort of on-staff custodial worker. Lana Lee, knowing that he got picked up for vagrancy and needs the job, because apparently vagrancy back then, I had to look this up, is just being around without a job, like just hanging around outside without a job, just being alive and unemployed is what they're picking people up for. That's vagrancy. So she knows that he needs the job or he'll go back to jail for vagrancy. So she like pays him next to nothing. Like she's immediately crummy to him, and he immediately dislikes her. Although I gotta say, he probably shouldn't have told her that he'd been picked up for vagrancy. That's poorly played, Burma. Anyhow, Burma is trying to kind of like he knows that Lana Lee is up to something with this young, like school age boy who keeps coming in and exchanging brown paper wrapped packages with her
For money. He's bringing
for
her
money.
money and she's giving him the brown paper packages and saying that
Yes.
it's for like for the orphans, right?
Yeah, she keeps telling Burma that it's for orphans. And he's like, nah, it's not for orphans.
Where the orphans getting all these money, they're all this money, they're orphans, right?
I will say Burma, and Burma is another protagonist who is at like along with the rest of the Night of Joy staff, this whole plot line takes kind of like runs parallel to Ignatius and his employment troubles. And I mean, this so much happens in this book.
So
But
much happens. There was times that I was reading it that was based not like what is going on, I can follow the storyline, but just like I will say I will say the way everything like dovetailed together, everything, fit together really neatly, tied up really well. And it was well done because there were times when I was reading the book that was just like, what is happening? Why are we following these storylines? Like, how is this coming together? It feels a little bit like there's no plot, like we're just kind of following random things. How it feels. And it ties together in the end, but it is a bunch of random stories.
John Kennedy Toole was from New Orleans. He was raised by, I don't know the lady, but she is described as a very hands-on, like overbearing sort of mother. I read a little bit of a biography of John Kennedy Toole, and there's these quotes from his mom when he's like 2 about just how genius, how special, how utterly gifted he was. And by all accounts, he was pretty smart. He skipped, I think, 1 or 2 grades and was consistently a couple years behind his classmates all the way through college. And he was very smart. He taught at Columbia. He went to Columbia and taught at Columbia. He taught at Hunter College, both in New York. He taught at, I believe, Loyola or Tulane when he came back to New Orleans. When he was younger, his mother like ran like children's theater and put him in plays, put him in all these things. And he was the star of all of her productions. And then he kind of turned to writing. And when he was young, he entered a novel contest for like teenagers or something and entered a novel called The Neon Bible. And it didn't win. And he was apparently pretty crushed by that. But he gets drafted during Vietnam. When he gets drafted, he gets sent to Puerto Rico to teach English to Spanish-speaking Puerto Ricans who are going to actually, I think, get shipped to Vietnam versus him sitting there teaching. But that's where he starts writing A Confederacy of Dunces. So he writes A Confederacy of Dunces, and he picks a single publishing house to send it to, and he sends it to Robert Gottlieb at Simon and Schuster, who reads it, who actually reads it. He just cold sends it to one guy at one publishing house. And Robert Gottlieb was, this is back at a time when agents were famous. I think a corollary today would be how showrunners are people whose names we know. Shonda
Yeah, right.
Rhimes.
Yeah.
Like,
Shonda Rhimes.
yeah, we know who Shonda Rhimes is. She's not in any of the shows, but she's the showrunner. She's a writer and she creates them. And agents, I think, had a celebrity like that back then. Like you knew who put out these books. And Robert Gottlieb had published Catch 22. So he sends it to Robert Gottlieb, who tells him, I love this. It's so funny. It's not like anything else, but I'm not going to publish it until you work on it. Sends John Kennedy Toole into a bit of a funk. He doesn't really recover from it. I think the way the story gets told now is that the book was rejected and he kills himself because of that. And it seems very much from the biography I've read that that is a romantic way of describing a tragic author's life. But his parents were like slipping into, like he needed to take care of them at a much younger age than he was anticipating having to take care of them. I think it seems like a lot more went into this suicide than this because it is incredible that this book was like if you've ever tried to do anything creative, you know that like no one just reads the first person doesn't read your thing one time and is just sort of like, yeah, but a little bit of work. Like it takes 1,000
You're lucky.
rejections.
You're lucky if anybody reads it or even
Yeah.
responds to you.
he sends it to like one of the most famous publishers in the country, who actually reads it and then responds to him and is like, "This is
in a
great.
positive way.
Yeah, I want to publish this eventually, but you've got to do work." And he had a very hard time figuring out what to do about it. And one of Robert Gottlieb's complaints, which I don't disagree with, was that it's not about anything. I know we're talking about themes. Is education enough? I also like reading through it. There is a certain theme, I think, of pushing like the people who want other people to do a thing that like their idea of what another person should be on that person. So we read the quotes from Myrna, like Myrna talking to that poor black lady about her racial problems, as she put it, believing that this woman wants to hear about this, or Mrs. Levy of Levy Pants brings Miss Trixie out to their house to like, help her.
Work on her and make her better and use her psychology correspondence course on this woman.
Yeah, to fix her, to make her better. And Miss Trixie just keeps telling anyone who will listen, "I want to retire and quit." And all Mrs. Levy hears is like, this poor woman's saying this because she's so demoralized, but I can change her. When Ignatius wants the factory workers to feel oppressed and to feel angry and to want to hit Mr. Gonzalez, who's never done anything wrong to them and who doesn't determine their pay, wants them to hit him with a brick. When Ignatius meets the young gay guy, his name's not Dorian Green, is it? What is it? What's his name?
It's Dorian Green. Yeah, no, you got it. Yeah, it is Dorian Green, which I really enjoyed.
Oh, it is Dorian Green. Yeah, yeah, yeah. What's the book that is it? Picture of Dorian Gray?
Picture of Dorian Gray.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's what the joke was, right? So when he meets Dorian Green and he just decides like, yes, this all of these gay guys need to join the military at the same time, and that will call, which by the way is a we haven't even talked about that, but he's pushing an agenda that he thinks they should go along with because he misunderstands who they are fundamentally.
He misunderstands who they are fundamentally. And again, there is that he's like he thinks because he has education that he's smarter than
Yeah.
everybody, right? Like he has this thing where he's above everybody, he knows more than everybody. So he is, we would all love world peace, right? But there's a reason we don't have it. And it's not going to
Yeah.
be solved by Ignatius J. Riley. And it's, and it's up there with his commentary on like on the black workers, right? Of like, oh, like we're the same. And they're not. We don't even have to get into all the ways that is a horribly racist thing, and all of the reasons that that is wrong. I think really stand alone and speak for themselves. But that's this, but it's the same, right? To just be like, oh no, if like all of these gay guys join the military, you guys will all be so busy having parties and planning balls that like there won't be time for war. War will just go
That's
away.
what he thinks. Yeah, he thinks like he thinks that not only will that work, and that is also the part of the novel where, well, yeah, let me to finish my original point. Robert, I'm pulling this as a theme, right? In my third read through of like pushing an agenda that you believe another person falls into, a sort of stereotypical agenda that you think is right for them onto them, despite their very vocal like protestations. But Robert Gottlieb comes back to John Kennedy Toole and says this book isn't about anything. Like it's about nothing. And I don't think he's wrong. I think we're finding themes in it because that's how we read, but it isn't really about anything. Like Ignatius does not learn. He doesn't change.
Yeah.
None of the characters really learn or change. Like Burma Jones gets a happy ending. Like he is the most sane person in the novel.
Yes, I agree with
Like he
that.
is the most regular human being that is the most like an actual just like perfectly nice person in the whole book. Santa Battaglia is out of her mind. Ignatius's mother is out of her mind. Myrna's out of her mind. The both of the Levies are out of their minds. Miss Trixie's out of her mind. Gonzalez is naive. Officer Mancuso is kind of a fool until a very abrupt character change from him in the last like
But it's not
fifth of the
even a
book.
character change. He just gets lucky.
He stops wearing the like disguises and like approaches his job differently. Maybe he might be the only person who changes.
No, I think he's wearing a disguise. I think he
No, he's just in a suit. He's just dressed in suit instead of in like the Santa Claus beard and like,
Oh, so that was something I wanted to bring up earlier is that a very hilarious part of this book to me is the descriptions of Patrolman Mancuso, like just dressed up in all of these ridiculous costumes,
yeah,
basically just like being and acting like a vagrant weirdo that he is supposed to be picking up, right? Like
yeah,
he is legitimately harassing people, just legitimately harassing people. Dorian Green just like punches him in the face because he like solicits him kind of. I mean, that's not his like intention, right? But he's like feels like Dorian Green feels that he's being like solicited and like and punches him, right? And gets mad. All of these people are like bothered and harassed by Patrolman Mancuso. Mancuso eventually just comes to the fact that like Ignatius J. Riley is kind of such this horrible person. I get the impression that he's just like, if I follow this idiot around, something's going to come from it. Like I'm going to get what
yeah.
all my boss wants is for me to bring in a suspicious character, and if I follow this idiot around, I think that he thinks he's going to bring Ignatius in. I'm going to prove that this guy is the suspicious character. This guy I tried to arrest in the beginning of the book, who, as we have discussed, is the worst person in the book. I think that he wants to bring him in, and he gets really lucky that like this like explosion of things happen at the Night of Joy.
So do you want to talk about the writing itself a little bit?
Let's talk about the writing itself.
Because Officer Mancuso reminded me, I think it's the scene. I might be mixing up two scenes and I'll apologize, but there's a scene, I think it's where Ignatius is talking to Dorian Green on the street, which is, I think, the scene where like, where I first sort of realized, like, Ignatius is an absolute insane person. Like, there is nothing okay about him. There isn't anything underlying here. He's crazy. But in the background, like just the way the narration is in the background of this conversation, the narration doesn't say it's Officer Mancuso, but it's like a guy dressed as a biker, but also in like a pair of loafers for some reason, tries to approach two women, one of whom turns around and like punches him in the face or it's just in the background. And like, because we've been reading, we know that it's Officer Mancuso in one of his disguises trying to like he tries to solicit two prostitutes who were in a scene a couple of scenes earlier. That's what it is.
Oh,
And,
that is yes.
and they beat him up.
And they beat him up.
And we don't like they don't say that it's him, but and I think that is very funny and very, I don't know. I think part of the way that this is written very well. I do think it is. I don't think Robert Gottlieb was wrong. I think it is overly long. I don't think it's about anything. And I think that I think the book would benefit from being about something at all.
The book would benefit from editing.
Yes.
The best books that you read did not start out as good as they were. They just don't. I mean, it's just why we have editors to go in and look at something with a certain eye and work with a writer and
Yeah.
help shape their idea and help shape their story into something that is a very good book.
Because by the
So
time we get to the grand finale, which is what I'm like, the night that Dorian goes to Dorian Green's party with all of his
then
gay
Ignatius goes
friends
to Dorian Green's party.
and the lesbians who I thought were very funny. I don't know.
I really enjoyed I enjoyed that
Yeah,
character.
I thought they were really fun. Um, but the night that he goes there, and then he goes to the night of joy because he thinks that his dream girl is working there in a sort of servitude. And once he meets her, because he's seen a picture of Lana Lee holding his copy of Constellations of Philosophy by Boethius, not saying it right, Boethius.
I'm reading it as Boethius.
Boethius, thank you. So he gets thrown out of Dorian Green's party. He goes to the night of joy. It turns out that it's not his dream girl. It's just Lana Lee who hates him. And then Darlene is trying to do her dance with her cockatoo. The cockatoo is supposed to pull Darlene's clothes off with these little tiny rings, one by one. Ignatius is dressed as a pirate for reasons we haven't gotten into, but he's dressed as a pirate with a gold hoop earring. So the cockatoo attacks Ignatius, falls out of the bar, out into the street. He is almost run over by the streetcar, but Burma Jones saves his life and pulls him out of the way. While this is going on, Officer Mancuso, dressed normally this time, approaches the bar. Lana Lee, trying to turn things around from the scene that Ignatius has called, propositions him, at which point he arrests her. Burma Jones leads him to the suspicious material under the bar, which turns out to be pornographic material she's been photographing and selling to schoolboys. And and the lesbians show up and they try to fight someone again and they also get arrested.
I think they've been arrested. I think he arrests them prior to the scene with Ignatius. I think they're just in the cop car.
Ignatius is passed out in the street and is taken to a hospital. And when all of that happens in so few pages, by the way, and all of that happens, there's still like 70 pages of book left.
Yes.
And like I'm exhausted by the time the arrest and Burma's a hero and like it's so long. Like, and I don't know, you and I were raised in an era, maybe this wasn't like you and I were raised in an era where we were raised in the Seinfeld era. Being
Right.
about nothing is okay. Things don't have to be about something. When you make something about nothing, you make it about everything, kind of.
Right. I
Like
mean,
like
there are a lot of, I mean, there are a lot of themes in this book. We've talked about the racial things in this book a couple times that bring up really obvious points about racism. This isn't a book about racism,
no.
but it is a commentary on it, right? And how things were. It is a commentary. We can look at that. We can pull that out of it. It is a book of, we've talked about like education. Is education enough? It's not. And we kind of know that, and we absolutely see that in this book. We've talked about the theme you brought up of like pushing your agenda on other people. Black characters in this book, the gay characters in this book are caricatures of Black people and gay people. The lesbians, right, are a caricature of like these really manly lesbians who just want to like fight and cause trouble. The gay guys in the book are these really extravagant, over the top.
While that's true, I do feel like every character is a caricature.
Yes.
And when Dorian Green has certain I don't know, a gay flamboyance that would be kind of like a stereotype or a caricature that would put on him, he is still given actual like work to do in the book. He's
Hmm.
not like a passing he's not used as a punchline.
No, he's not.
He's not. Burma Jones is not used as a punchline. In fact, he is, I think we mentioned the only sane person in the book, I
He's the only
think.
same person in the book.
Dorian Green, I guess, is, well, I don't know if he's sane, but I do think that a little bit of the sting of the fact that every single person is a caricature of themselves, like everyone is so heightened, it doesn't feel like it does very much in the narrative not feel like these people are meant to be jokes or punchlines. These are people who are meant to represent the people, the myriad people of New Orleans. And if anything, Ignatius's interactions with them are what is predicated on stereotype, like is his approach to them. And they themselves do not behave stereotypically, I don't think. I wanted to do a couple of quotes that I thought were funny.
Full amount.
Ignatius calling things an abomination. I like the line, this is Ignatius saying this, but veneration of Mark Twain is one of the roots of our current intellectual stalemate. I personally like Mark Twain, but I think it's funny that Ignatius,
I do have a comment that I wrote down that is, why does he hate Mark Twain so much? He mentions it more than once in the book. What is his beef with Mark
I don't
Twain?
know, I just like that he has one. I don't know what the problem is.
I like that he has one too, because it was just like, what? Because it's never explained, it's never referenced, and I did not. I mean, I'll be honest, my familiarity, I guess, with the works of Mark Twain are very limited to school, and it's been a minute.
I guess he thinks he's like cheap entertainment.
Oh, all right. I mean, yeah, maybe it's that. But yeah, I just was like, what the beef with Mark Twain? And then, like I said, it was just like I couldn't draw any parallels. Maybe it's just a random thing.
Ignatius observes his mother coming down the street, and the narration tells us that her brown wedgies squeaked with discount price defiance. I like that line. He describes the Smithsonian Institution as a grab bag of our nation's refuse.
Ooh, I really enjoyed that one too. I also highlighted that.
I'll do the other I'll do the other what he that dreary fraud Mark Twain is
Right, Mark Twain.
another shot across Mark Twain's bow. I like the line for I mingle with my peers or no one, and since I have no peers, I mingle with no one.
Yeah, I also enjoyed that. And that is,
I also this is He describes white Protestants as a class of humans who, as a group, specialize in ignorance, cruelty, and torture. Just like a random attack on the fact that he calls his uprising of the factory workers at Levy Pants the Crusade for Moorish Dignity. From the beginning, Mrs. Riley looked at her son's reddening face and realized that he would very happily collapse at her feet just to prove his point. He had done it before. The last time she had forced him to accompany her to Mass on Sunday, he had collapsed twice on the way to the church, and had collapsed once again during the sermon about sloth, reeling out of the pew and creating an embarrassing disturbance. And then when Ignatius tells the story of his tragic trip on the Cine Cruiser, um, I thought this was like a very good example of like what's actually like one of the things that's funny about the book is he's talking about driving out of town and like getting into the rural areas outside of New Orleans, which is when he started feeling ill and scared. And he says, by the time we left the swamps and reached those rolling hills near Baton Rouge, I was getting afraid that some rural rednecks might toss bombs at the bus. They love to attack vehicles, which are a symbol of progress, I guess. That little bit of dialogue I think is very funny because it's the second part. They love to attack vehicles, which are a symbol of progress, I guess. Like he's inventing a rationale for these imaginary rural rednecks who might attack his Cine Cruiser that he's riding in. And at face value, guessing that the rednecks hate buses because they hate progress and progress equals the bus, like the plain, boring, run-of-the-mill bus. I think that's pretty funny. But another layer of that is if you manage to remember that this book is taking place in the 60s, and there had recently been several famous bus attacks on marchers during the civil rights movement where they were being bused to march for their rights. And then you remember that Ignatius would know about these or have heard about them, and that he has misunderstood that act, the bombing of those buses, so completely as to assume that it might happen to the commercial Greyhound that he's on, and that the reason that it would happen, the bombing of the bus, would be the unyielding hatred of progress, again, represented by the unremarkable bus. Like it's funny and it tells us something about the idiocy of the character and his like the fact that he does not see anything besides himself. Like every thought he has about others is an internal reflection of his own, like he doesn't see anybody else as a person. So, assuming that his imaginary rednecks dislike progress is just on at face value, I think funny.
And that to me is something just like that struck me. Something I had highlighted is that he says it's like in one of his writings, something that I had highlighted. This comes from the when he talks about that dreary fraud, Mark Twain. So this failure to make contact with reality is, however, characteristic of almost all of America's quote unquote art. Any connection between American art and American nature is purely coincidental, but this is only because the nation as a whole has no contact with reality. That is one of the reasons why I have always been forced to exist on the fringes of its society, consigned to the limbo reserved for those who do know reality when they see it. And that is interesting to me because, as you've just pointed out, this is not a man that has contact with reality.
No.
This is a man who lives. This is a man whose brain lives deeply in medieval times, right? Like not even he's not even doing the thing where like he's looking back into like the 50s is the ideal time or whatever it is. Like he's looking back into like the medieval past,
Yeah.
right?
He thinks that things were
Um,
better off then.
he thinks that things were better off then. He has no contact with reality. He's rarely going out, right? Like he's rarely going out and doing things. He's rarely leaving the house. He doesn't have a job.
He goes to see movies and stuff just so he can hate them. He's a pre-internet troll. Like he's a troll.
Yes. Okay. So
He's an incel. He's a
yes, that was a question that I had written down. Is Ignatius an incel? If this book were written today,
except he's not an incel because he is voluntarily celibate. He's a volcel.
that's true. He is voluntarily celibate,
Volcel.
a volcel. But this is a man that would be online just writing absolute,
Yes, that's it. He
absolute
spews, he
vitriol.
sits in his room and he writes vitriol, which we get to read. He just spews it at everyone. The only person who really gives him any of it back is the guy who owns the hot dog cart.
It's true. Is the only person who ever really comes back at him and is truly angry at him.
That was one of Robert Gottlieb's other complaints or suggestions back to John Kennedy Toole was that Ignatius is a wonderful character, but there is far too much of him, and he is not as wonderful as you seem to think he is. Like, there's more of him in this book than there needs to be. And I agree with that as well. So the way this book comes to publication is John Kennedy Toole tragically leaves New Orleans after his book is not immediately picked up. He takes it kind of hard, but he doesn't seem to recognize the rousing success of even having someone respond is his parents are both declining. He is realizing that he is going to be like the sole caretaker for them, very young age. His book didn't get picked up. He goes on a road trip and on it, he pulls over to the side of the road. He takes a length of hose out of his car and he puts it from the tailpipe into his car, rolls up the windows, and asphyxiates himself. His mother destroys his suicide note and goes around just telling people, like, it was fine. He said he loved me. That's kind of how she approached it. And no, you don't need to read it. He just said he loved me and he really appreciated being my son. That's kind of how she goes about dealing with that. But she finds his manuscript and takes it around, and she eventually takes it to Walker Percy, who taught at Loyola University in New Orleans. Walker Percy was a teacher and an author there. He'd written a book that was fairly popular called The Moviegoer, is the only thing I know by him. And Walker Percy, who writes the intro to pretty much any copy of Confederacy of Dunces that you pick up, tells this story, but he read it hoping he could just read it, dismiss it, and like go on with his life. But it kept being good and kept being good. And he's how it gets published in 1980. And then it goes on to win the Pulitzer in 1980, which there is some, I don't know, I had to pull old articles to find this, and it's not like a proven thing. But there is a little bit of a sense that it was given the Pulitzer kind of as a kind of as a shot at like Northeast writers who thought they were so smart and who had been winning the Pulitzer over and over again.
Mm.
And it was kind of given to this to kind of be like, we don't, there's other stuff. Let's see who won the 1979 Pulitzer. Okay, so leading up to this in 1975, it's a book called The Killer Angels by Michael Shara. I've not read it. Humboldt's Gift by Saul Bellow. I have read it. That's 1976. Elbow Room by James Allen McPherson. Do you know that?
Mm-mm. No, I've never heard of it.
1979 is The Stories of John Cheever by John Cheever. You've heard of John Cheever at least.
Oh yeah, and Saul Bellow.
Followed in 1980 by The Executioner Song by Norman Mailer. Not read it, but we've both heard of it.
Well, we both heard of it, yeah.
And then in 1981 is A Confederacy of Dunces, followed by Rabbit is Rich by John Updike, which seems a return to form for like.
I was gonna say, yeah, we're going back to
He's a Chicago guy, I guess, but still, Cheever, Updike, Saul Bellow,
Mailer,
all fit into like,
Norma Mailer.
yeah, Mailer kind of, yeah. The Color Purple wins in 1983. Ironweed wins in 84, but and then Foreign Affairs, which I'm only reading so that we can get to 1986 with Lonesome Dove, which we should do at some point because we both enjoyed that.
Oh, Lonesome Dove, so good.
Yeah, that was a good one. So there's some sense that it was kind of nominated and won the Pulitzer, just sort of as publishers and stuff, kind of saying like, we don't need you as much as you think. You're not as important as you think you are. I don't know if there's any truth to that. Lots of failed attempts to turn this into a movie. Let's see, Harold Ramis, Egon from Ghostbusters, for those of you who are into other classics, wanted to write and direct an adaptation starring John Belushi as Ignatius and Richard Pryor as Burma Jones. Belushi died, prevented it. And then later, John Candy was going to be in it. His death prevented that. After that, Chris Farley was talked about for the lead, but he also died. which led many people to say there was a curse, the role of Ignatius, curse. Yeah, and cocaine might be the curse. The one that I think is interesting is that John Waters was interested in directing an adaptation that would have starred Divine, who, for those of you listening who are not super familiar with John Waters' oeuvre, Divine is the mother, is the man who played the mother in the original Hairspray. That was Divine. And after Hairspray became very popular, Divine was kind of poised to actually kind of blow up a little bit, but then Divine also died. Let's see, Stephen Fry, the British guy, was at one point commissioned to adapt it for the screen. Um, John Goodman wanted to play it at another point. Steven Soderbergh was going to adapt it at another point. And there's a famous staged reading of a script that I think is the Steve Soderbergh version that was going to be directed by David Gordon Green, was going to be released in 2005. And this is the famous lineup that from like our time period would have been. It was Will Ferrell as Ignatius, Lily Tomlin as Irene. Let's see, Paul Rudd as Officer Mancuso, Kristen Johnson as Lana Lee, Mos Def would be Burma Jones, Rosie Perez as Darlene, Olympia Dukakis as Santa Battaglia, and Miss Trixie. Oh, this is from this was a staged reading of the script. This was the cast for that. Natasha Lyonne was Myrna, Alan Cumming as Dorian Green, which chef's kiss to that. That's great casting. John Shea as Gonzalez, Jesse Eisenberg as George, John Conlon as Claude Robichaud, Jace Alexander as bartender, Ben Celia Weston as Miss Annie, Miss Inez and Miss Levy, and Dan Hedaya as Mr. Levy. And that was the sort of famous stage reading of the script. And then Soderbergh couldn't film it because I think Hurricane Katrina. He did eventually get a stage version that Nick Offerman is in that I think went fine and no one died, and I think everyone liked it.
Maybe Nick Offerman broke the curse. Nick Offerman was Ignatius.
Yeah, Nick Offerman was Ignatius.
I like that. I like Natasha Lyonne for Myrna. I like Natasha Lyonne for anything. Basically, I really enjoy
Yeah.
her. She's great.
I will say my one other critique is the end that Myrna Mink, he's about to go to the insane asylum, and Myrna Minkoff comes and picks him up and just takes him away. This would be a better book if he went to the insane asylum.
I felt that too.
Yeah, I think it would be a legitimately better.
When somebody knocks on the door and it's Myrna, I was a
Yeah.
little disappointed.
If he went to the insane asylum, gets there, and it ends with him looking around and like starts telling someone the Cine Cruiser story or something like that, it would have been a more fulfilling ending and a better ending. So would you recommend people read it?
I would recommend that people read this book. Yes, absolutely. I do. I found this to be an enjoyable book. I find it an enjoyable book to read in today's society because we do have, like we were discussing, like, like, is he an incel? Like, no, he's a voluntary celibate. And he doesn't have some hatred for women specifically. He's a misanthrope across the board, basically.
Pretty much hates everybody.
Hates
He does
everybody.
hate he does categorically hate women, but not just women.
But not specifically for being women.
No, no, he just hates.
He just hates everyone. He's misanthropic. But I absolutely think that, because I was thinking just the same thing as you, is like, this is a man who would just be sitting like absolutely roasting and writing negative comments on things. But I picture this man to be, in his room, just, stealing people's souls, purposely trying to make people angry, or just using the internet as this platform for getting out these insane ideas and thinking that that's a really great way to air them, or whatever it is that people who write insane comments on the internet, whatever their reasoning is for doing that. So I think it's a fun book to read. Like, it's a fun book to read in any day and age.
Yeah, I would also recommend it. I think it's fun. I have some criticisms of it. I do think it's too long. I think there's too much Ignatius. I think there's some other like weak points to it. But overall, I would recommend it. I enjoyed reading it. I'm glad. I don't feel like I shouldn't have read it a third time. I would recommend. I think you should pick it up. And like I mentioned, it's on that front table. It's guaranteed somewhere easily accessible in Barnes and
Absolutely.
Noble.
It's a staff pick. I've seen it as a staff pick in many, many, many bookstores over the years.
So what are we reading next?
So the next book we are going to be reading is Slaughterhouse-Five by Kurt Vonnegut.
Okay. Well, we will see you. We will see you
See
all
you
next
next time.
time. Thanks for
Thanks
listening.
for listening.